Okay. All right. So I am delighted to introduce Erica Green to us. Erica is from Boulder. You may ask, why are we having a Boulder artist on Zoom when she could come in person? And it's because her large scale fiber installations seem to work best in this format, and our schedule worked out this way. So Erica was introduced to me by the curator at the Dairy, Drew Austin, when Margaret and I met with him last year and said, give us your great ideas about textile artists. And Erica was one of them. She will tell you she started as a ceramicist. Is that the same thing as a potter? Anyway, she started as a ceramicist and moved to working with fiber and particularly large scale installations. So yesterday, for those of you who were with us, we saw examples of her beautiful work and asked her some insightful questions, she thought. And tonight, we are delighted to have her show us more behind the scenes, how she actually gets those 1,000 pounds of fiber up on a chandelier frame. I'm just making that up. So without further ado, I am going to mute myself.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to make sure that everyone can see my screen.
It's doing the loading
as it's loading.
Okay.
It was up there a second ago, and then it went to loading.
Okay. I don't know why it does that.
There we go.
Okay, great. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Denise and Jane and Elizabeth and really everyone who, welcomed me to be here with you all tonight. I really appreciate that. And looking forward to some thoughtful questions that you might have. Feel free to shout them out. I have a hard time looking at the chat and speaking. So Elizabeth is kind enough to interrupt me if there's an important question throughout the talk. As Jane said, my background is in ceramics. I actually was a member of the Boulder Potters Guild for a long time. And so my BFA is in ceramics. And then when I moved to Boulder, I did 2 years of a post-bac program at the University of Colorado in their ceramics department. And the connection or the leap from clay to fibers was I was talking about mending and repair, and I was trying to utilize textiles with my clay. And so I would poke holes in my clay and then I would fire it, and it wasn't really working. It didn't really make sense. And so Scott Chamberlain, who some of you probably know, he's a professor there. He just encouraged me to drop the clay and pursue fibers and see where it took me. And honestly, I've never looked back. I just love fibers. I know I could learn a lot from you all. At one point, when I was quite young, sewing and knitting and crocheting and embroidery was a huge part of my growing up. And I think about that time fondly. So someday I'm going to learn how to do that again, reteach myself. Okay, so I am a former college athlete, and I treat art like a physical, mental, and a mental project and I have strong themes of repetition, stamina, labor, and discipline throughout. About 5 years ago, I started working with installation. I was recovering from a surgery, and I started using this material that you see here. And I picked it up because I thought I was going to reteach myself how to knit. And then I just got really interested in knotting it, basically just tying simple knots with this really lovely material. It's really just a jumbo yarn. It is wool with a little bit of acrylic, so it gives that nice stretchy look. So you'll see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but some of this has been completely stretched out on purpose, because I love that how you can see through some of the materials. And then I love how some of these knots are really thick and big. And I think of these knots as a metaphor for time. I'm going to read my little statement here. So my site-conscious fiber installations explore the endless process of repairing and rebuilding oneself. My practice calls to mind a kind of marathon or endurance-based approach to working, in that each strip of fabric, knot, and tie is a paced passage of time. While a knot typically represents a stopping point, Green's practice utilizes the knot as a symbolic gesture for mending and continuation. So, like I said, knots are a metaphor for me. It's kind of a metaphor for time. Those knots are building over a time period, and they become stronger. When you tie a knot and a string, it makes that string stronger, but it also, you're bringing two things together. And so sometimes you're bringing two things that don't necessarily go together, but together they become a stronger. And so here I am in my studio. This is when I was preparing for my solo show at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art, or BMOCA. Okay, and so this was an important installation, or this was an important work that I made in my portfolio. It was one of the first times that I jumped off of kind of working more two-dimensionally. I used to work with basically sewing paper and using basically what I called thread drawings. And you can see those on my website. But basically I was working with thick watercolor paper, and I was using thread, and I was sewing it and doing something what I called thread drawings. I don't know if that's an official term, but that's something I was doing. And so, as I told you, I was recovering from a surgery, and I was making these knotted fibers. Drew Austin, who is the curator at the Dairy Center, he invited me to be in a group show. And he really encouraged me to use this staircase. And at first I was really not into it. The staircase is really awkward. It was super dirty. I had to clean it first. And I think he was maybe thinking about me using the wall. And, I just started threading my fibers through the beams of the staircase. And it was an interesting process for me, because I started to build an environment. I am thinking about site-specific work in a something that I've never really thought about before. And so this was, an important piece for my work, or for my portfolio, I should say. So you'll see underneath the staircase over here, you can walk into it. And so viewers can kind of be in this enclosed space that's not completely private, but it feels semi-secluded. And so you'll see the treatment in the front, it's more knotted than the fibers in the back. And it's called drifting because as people would walk up and down the staircase, the fibers would kind of, move to record the presence of the person going up and down this awkward staircase, which is something I thought was quite interesting. Or when the air conditioner unit came on, it would also drift back and forth, which was kind of fun. So here's a detail on the left.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said this is large yarn?
Jumbo, go ahead.
And where do you buy it? And how do you know how much to get? And did you tie all those knots before you took it to the dairy? Okay, there's a whole series of.
Yeah, so it's called jumbo yarn. I don't know if that's a technical term. You all are more up on that than I am, but it's something I just found at Joann Fabrics, and I just really was drawn to how soft it was, and how it would, when I pulled it apart, it was this, it almost made it feel like it was going to fall apart, so I could see through it, but I could keep knotting it over and over again and make it look stronger. So I was really just using it because I enjoyed the way it looked. So the aesthetic look of it when it was all together. And when I made this piece, and really when I make all of my pieces, because it's such a site-specific thing, I usually don't have access to the space beforehand. I have to buy way more than I think I need, and not prepare, I have to prepare and knot these strands beforehand. So I have to prepare a lot more than I think I need, because I'm unsure basically of how much I need. And I don't want to lie awake at night thinking, oh gosh, tomorrow's the last day of installation and I'm not going to have enough. So I definitely, I over prepare, if that makes sense. And Jane, did I answer all of your questions?
Yes, you must have bought out Joanne's entire stash of this stuff.
Oh, this is just a small, it's funny, every time I use this stuff, I think, oh, this is the biggest thing I could ever make. And it gets bigger and bigger every time, which is fun. But yes, I should have stock in this yarn. So anyway, so moving on, this is a different installation that I did at a gallery in downtown Denver called Rule Gallery. And again, this is just working with an installation in more of a white box gallery setting. I had to come up with an idea of how to make this a unique setting, but I was really interested in this concept of building blankets that aren't necessarily a traditional blanket, but I'm building these blankets over time. And so these knots build upon one another and, create this blanket over time. So this is another installation I did in 2019 for the Art of the State at the Arvada Center of the Arts. And I'm going to show you some installation, basically some photos here in a second of me installing it. So whenever I'm planning installation, I meet with the curator and we walk through the space. The curator had suggested that I install in this kind of white box gallery that they have in their large space downstairs. And there was just nothing unique about it. It wasn't inspiring. I really, I kind of thrive when the space has something quirky about it or something different. And so what I liked about this space, I guess the architect who built this building thought of these as film strips. And so each of these openings is considered a film strip because, as we know, the Arvada Center for the Arts, it has cinema, arts, music, it showcases lots of different art forms. So anyways, I was interested in utilizing these spaces, and you'll see down here on the bottom right, even in the entrance of the gallery, I tried to utilize this. And again, I was just thinking about building these knots over time and thinking about them kind of piling up in areas, and they almost look like snowdrifts. Here I am installing the work. A lot of this stuff, I went to school for ceramics and I've taken some sculpture classes as part of when you go through a BFA program, you take all sorts of different classes, but really nothing prepared me for making site-specific installation or being on a scissor lift like you see here. So really it was just, I was talking to the curator there and he was really so helpful in helping me figure out how to go about doing this. And so I made these forms out of plywood. So the right hand image is the structure that I built to put the fibers over. So basically I made like a taco style, like a taco shell, almost like a hard taco shell out of plywood. And then I painted it and I drilled that, the bottom of the shell into the top of the wall. And you'll see that I have T-pins here. It's a really horrible photo and I apologize for that. But I put T-pins in there to keep the fibers from falling off. And so I hammered those in, and that's how I started the process. And then in the middle of this taco, the filling, if you will, is just a pillow. It's a stuffed pillow. The middle image here is basically of looking up from the first floor. So this was something I didn't really think about. Like I didn't realize that this was going to be a double-sided installation. and the scissor lift didn't reach all the way up there. And so I really had to, there was a lot of like putting the strands into place on the second level, walking down the steps, looking at it from below, and then trying to fix it from above. So that was kind of an interesting thing about this. And a lot of these installations, they're just such a physical labor. You know, being on a scissor lift, it's quite shaky. It's, you know, you can't drink too much coffee. You need to make sure that you take breaks. Every move you make, the whole thing shakes. So these are things that, you know, you just don't get prepared for. So this is my dog on the left, excuse me. His name is Beast. He, you know, is the same color as the fiber, which you know, is kind of a good thing. On the right-hand side, you'll see that these are prepared bags of knotted strings. And so basically what I do is I just sit there and I knot them, and then I need to separate them into smaller bags. Otherwise they get too tangled. And so usually when I arrive at an installation, it is me in my, you know, SUV just loaded to the gills with bags of fiber. And then I, you know, unload it when I get there, and it's just bags and bags of fiber. So this is another installation. This was my first solo show. I was very excited about having the whole gallery space to myself for the very first time. This was in 2019 at the now defunct Boulder Creative Collective space. It was in a warehouse, but they got some funding to make a gallery, and they put these black beams overhead because the gallery walls didn't go all the way to the top of the warehouse. And so I liked this idea of putting the strands of fiber over these black beams. And again, I'm thinking about time and each of these strands, you know, kind of piling up in different areas, and you know, thinking about how the visitor can navigate through this installation. And I really wanted to create different areas where each participant could kind of wander through. The other really fun thing about my work is that it's absorbed sound. And so when you're in the middle of the space, it almost felt like, you know, it calms the noise in the room. There's something so calming about being in that space, which was, you know, so wonderful. This is in the entrance. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask another question? You told us yesterday you go to the galleries and you look at the space and you kind of walk around. Do you then go home and sketch these?
Yes.
Or is this organic?
Yeah, so yep. So I go home and sketch, and I'll show you some of my sketches here in a minute with some of the installations in the next couple of slides. But basically for this, I sketched each of these kind of wall of fiber, if you will, on vellum. And then I overlapped them to see how each one would look. And so I really liked so here's on the right-hand side, you'll see this is me right here and the little polka dot skirt. I'm in that space, and you can see how that kind of the first wall and the second set of fiber, you can fit a kind of a large group of people in there. But so in order to work that out, I basically drew it on a see-through paper or vellum, and I wanted to see how that would look. So that's definitely something that I consider as well. And then another thing to note, at the back of the gallery, I had basically just strands of fiber. And as you all know, we're all fiber artists, and we love just the touch and the feel of textiles. And so people want to touch the work, and I really wanted to give them the opportunity to do that. And so at the back of the wall, that last wall, if you will, the wall of fiber, I basically left those untouched fibers and then just let people kind of go crazy. And as you can see, some people showed up and they, French braided, they did macrame, they, tied horizontal knots and vertical knots. And so that was really fun to see. People really enjoyed that element of the opening, and throughout the show, people could knot the fibers. This is another show that I did in Basalt at the Art Base. Again, thinking about these knotted strands building up blankets over time. So I started using felt, this really thick felt, and I really love it. It's just so wonderful to work with. It's quite expensive. Most of this is 100% wool. Some of it is what do I want to say? It's got some recycled material in there. You'll see these gray strips. So it's not, some of it's 100% wool, some of it's a recycled material that has wool in it. And so again, I was thinking about time. I almost think about this as like a timeline. And this show is called A Moment, Please. And so I was just thinking about different moments in maybe a set time period where there's some bright moments, some big moments, some small moments, some dark moments. And I was just thinking about that in terms of a timeline and building that up over time. Again, this was in Basalt, and so I had to drive all the way down there because, everybody, I kind of become known for this site-specific fiber installation. And so gallery spaces want a site-specific work. And so I need to take a site visit wherever I go. So I had to drive down to Basalt and look at this gallery space and think, okay, well, what's unique about this space and how can my work enhance this space? And so they have this half wall. And so I basically drilled these wood beams on top of that half wall and then collected the, kind of dangled the fibers over those beams. And then again, using kind of that dark blue hue is to make that off-white fiber pop. These are my kids. They love to come and help me install work, and a huge motivation to see them, watch me work, and they're also really fun and silly, as you can see. This installation, again, this was in a space that I needed to go see. So I met the curator and we spoke about this. I just kind of cruised around the space and I try and find a space that could be unique to my work, or how can my work, I asked myself this question, how can my work enhance this space? And so this piece in particular, this was a former gallery space, like a commercial gallery space. It's now owned by the university. I'm sorry, it's not owned by the University of Colorado. It was given to kind of free of rent to the University of Colorado Springs. And so they used it as a gallery space downtown. And this space used to hold a Dale Chihuly chandelier, a glass chandelier, many years ago, is what I've been told. And so I was really interested in utilizing this space. This whole space there's glass walls on either side of my sculpture back there that you can't see. It's got this tile floor that rings this gallery space, or this chandelier. And so I really wanted to think about how can I create something kind of falling down. And so I created, I created a structure. Oh, I guess I didn't include that. I created a grid structure out of wood and then dangled the fibers on top. And I'm using the thick felt down here on the floor. And it's called the embers because everything kind of glowed in the room. And I liked that element of that. Here is a few images from the opening. This is another piece. I spoke kind of at a bigger length, but I made this post King Soopers, shooting, which, was in my neighborhood. And I knew a lot of, it was just a horrible time for our community. And this took place at the Boulder Creative Collective, their space on Pearl Street. And it was really, it was a meditative process for me to be on the floor making this work. This is called California King, and it's knotted fibers on a mattress. And basically I created this blanket to sit over this mattress that you'll see here. Okay, and so now this is my show from the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art. And I'm going to show you a little bit more detail on how I went about thinking through this installation. And so I was in Union Works Gallery upstairs at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art. And I did a lot of site visits. Luckily, I live in Boulder and I could go several times. I've also seen several shows there, which is kind of a gift. But, you know, this Union Works Gallery has these weird openings. And I knew I wanted to utilize those, but I wasn't quite sure how. But I decided to kind of build up this 100% wool felt. These knotted, it was basically a knotted felt that I built up in these frames. And I also wanted to talk about time. And so in order to do that, I decided to think about time as a gradient. And so when something first happens, it's kind of this deep, intense feeling, this deep, intense moment. And so I associated that with the color red. And, you know, as time moves on, as you heal, as you move through that space, things get less intense. And so I thought about a gradient as a metaphor for time. And so you'll see these sewing pins that I made. I made about 7,000 of them for this show, which is kind of insane. But I made them out of clay, and then I painted them this gradient. And so this, you'll see the stairwell. It's visible from all sides of the gallery. And, you know, just thinking about time. So these are some sketches so on the left-hand side here, this is my sketch for how I thought through these openings. And at first, you know, and this is how I communicated with the curator as well. She wanted to see a visual idea of how I was going to do this. And so at first, when I was thinking, what I was thinking is doing a chandelier in the middle of that kind of what they call the bell tower. And that was kind of tricky because it kind of got in the way of the fiber pieces that were in the window well, and it just seemed like too much. So we talked about basically taking that out. And then over here on the right are just some other general ideas. A lot of times when I go see this space, I either think it's like way bigger or way smaller. And so originally I was going to have 7 of these chandeliers. This is called white flags. And I only made 3, but in my mind, I could fit 7 of these in this gallery space, which was definitely not an option. So to go back to this drawing, so this is me just trying to figure it out. And again, I did this in my sketchbook, and then I also did it on a piece of vellum. And then I mapped it out like an interior designer would map out a space using grid paper. And, you know, the largest chandelier, this one in the middle is 6 feet by 6 feet. And I think this one is 2 by 3 over here on the right. And this one is 4 by 3 or 4 by 2, something like that. And so basically I mapped that out much like an interior designer would. I put this pole in here and I sat in the space with the curator, and then we quickly realized, okay, there's no way I can fit 7 of these in this space. So, you know, sometimes it's a lot of trial and error, and it is, you know, I have a week to install these works. And so sometimes you don't realize these things until the day, you know, you start installing. But luckily I had done enough planning to figure out what I needed. And then here's some other pieces. This one is called In the Thick of It on the left, and this on the right, it's called What Remains. And again, I'm using that thick felt and the clay sewing pins that I made, thinking about these as timeline pieces as well. This one is called In the Thick of It. And you can't tell from this photo, you know, the nice thing about my work, or what I think is nice, I like rewarding people for going to actually see the work in person. I think that there's a different element of surprise with my work when you see it in person. that photos and Instagram or, my website just can't capture. The smell of the room when you go into the gallery, just it smells like felt. And this piece here, I was working with a gradient. And so underneath is this lighter red, and then underneath it's an even lighter red, and you just can't tell right now. You can see kind of some of the lighter reds peeking through, but I wanted this idea of this gradient of this, this deeply intense moment called In the Thick of It, where you're kind of in it, you're in this kind of bold moment, and your feelings have built up, and you're kind of at this deep red outermost layer here. And I'm starting to work with these knotted little balls here to just kind of symbolize time, kind of just getting crazy in that moment. And then this one is What Remains. I really enjoyed kind of wrapping this one around the wall, thinking again about a timeline here, playing with those clay sewing pins. And here's a video. I hope that you guys can see this. This is me just making these clay sewing pins. And again, I'm using a sewing pin as a metaphor for healing. And so basically I handcrafted all of these pins. I used air dry clay, and then I would paint them various colors. So, mostly deep reds and the light pinks and whatnot. And then I also have moved on to other colors. So you'll see that, that kind of deep, dark hue there as well. Okay, so this installation right here, oops. Okay, so I wanted to show you an image of my car. This is me basically going to a hotel and installing some work there. And this is the wood frame here in the middle that I made. And this is the grid that I made. And I, put bolts in all of them. And I have to work with an engineer on how heavy this thing weighs, because obviously they need to know how much it weighs. I work with an art handler. This was commissioned by Nine Dots, and this is at Hotel Indigo in downtown Denver. And so, it was about a year in the making. I worked with the interior design team. I worked with an engineer, and just basically making sure that this thing is not going to fall down on someone. And so I constructed this wood frame. I had to weigh everything. I had to know how much fiber I was putting on this thing, because they needed to know how heavy it was. So this right here with the red arrows, this is the frame collapsed in my car. You can't see the end of it, but I have this 4Runner, and it was basically touching the front of my windshield. And then, I have that window that goes down, and it was hanging out the back, and I had to drive from Boulder to Denver with that. And then the bags of fiber in there as well. And this is just another video of me making In the Thick of It. I'm just freehand cutting this thick felt. It's about 3 millimeters in length. And so, this is a lot of cutting, a lot of, it's hard on my hands for sure. I have to take breaks. And so I freehand cut them. And then, as you'll see, I start knotting them and tying them into those balls that you saw in that installation.
So there's a couple questions. The first one is that industrial felt?
Yes, some of it is industrial felt. Some of it is called designer wool felt. But I use both of them. The designer felt is, the color is more vibrant and more consistent. The industrial felt is, it's got some variety in there.
And are you lucky enough to get a volume discount?
No, I have asked. And that off-white jumbo yarn that I've been using. This is just another video that you guys can watch. That jumbo yarn, I have contacted the the supplier, it's called, it's called Red Heart, and I needed to order like, just a semi truck of it in order to get a bulk discount. So unfortunately, I just wait for sales and I order that way. But yes, it's quite expensive, as you all know, because I'm using a lot of the material.
And then how much do your sculptures generally weigh?
This one right here, I estimated, I think it's about 300 pounds, but I told them that it was about 500 because I just want to be real sure.
Yep.
So basically what I did is I calculated how much each side was using. And then as you saw in my other one, the interior of the frame has fiber on it as well. And so I basically had to put it up in my studio and calculate how much fiber I was using, and then figure out how much each strand weighs, and do the math and figure out how much the frame weighs, and then how much the hardware, all of that. But they definitely 9 Dot and the art handler definitely helped me with that. And so this is that piece that I was talking about at Hotel Indigo that I, had my car full of fiber and the frame that was sitting out there. This is the start of the installation process. And so I was working on this super rickety, I don't even know if you could call this a scissor lift. I'm not sure what this was, but it was insanely hard to use. The scissor lifts are really expensive to rent, and the hotel actually had this one. I'm sure they used this to change light bulbs. But I ended up using this as well. But it was really hard because somebody had to be up on this tall ladder, and I was in this scissor lift thing that, it just got really shaky at the top. And this is Jared up there. He's an art handler, and him and his partner here were so helpful. They have done this a bunch of times. And so I was able to rest easy because they just are the A team and so helpful. I would highly recommend them if you guys ever need something like this done. So we put this piece in, and once I get to the space, I have to wrap the whole frame. And so a lot of the stuff has to happen on site. So I took the grid into my car and I had to collapse it. I had to take it, uncollapse it and screw all the things in. And then I had to sit there and wrap it. And then I could begin my installation. Just hanging this and having it level was a whole, it took an entire day. Those are the things that I'm so thankful that I had Jared and the other art handler helping with, because that is something that it's really hard physically to look up for an entire day to try and make this frame level was quite challenging. And then here I am on the right, basically taking strands up and down the ladder. And like I said, it's such a physical thing. I have to be in shape to put these things up. This took about, I want to say, 3 days to make. And then, I usually come back on the 4th day just to check and make sure everything is where I want it to be. And so this is the end product. And honestly, I did my part last summer, and the interior design, like all the furniture, didn't come in until like 6 or 8 months later. And then I didn't get the photography until, I don't know, 4 months after that. So it seemed like it took forever. I titled this one Huddle because the whole room was just kind of this circular space, just kind of closing in on this interior spot. And I liked this idea of just, people huddling under my sculpture.
And what was the size of the grid?
This one is, I think this one is 8 foot by 8 foot. So yeah. And that's all. And so please let me know if you have any questions. I don't know if hopefully I didn't go too much over time. It looks like I'm good here. but yeah, please let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully I gave you a little more insight than yesterday on kind of my process.
Are you able to recycle some of the yarn from one installation to the next installation?
Yes. Sometimes I sell these things, which is great. But I reuse all of it. Nothing goes to waste unless it's up on somebody's on their wall. And the nice thing about these works, they absorb sound, and so some interior designers have found me, and I will make these, for people's, media rooms, things like that. This work here, let me get to it. Works like these on the wall, those are quite popular for like homes, like media rooms, things like this. And so, basically if I don't sell it, I just reuse it. Nothing goes to waste.
How do you get your installations? Do you apply for, do you apply for proposals, or do you meet with curators, or how do you make that connection?
That's a great question. So 9 Dots is a great company to work with. It's a woman-owned business based out of Denver, and they have something called a Dotfolio. And so artists can upload their work on their kind of own portfolio. It's a little bit of a pain it's an extra step because you have to upload your work and put all the information in there. But once you're in that system, then they can kind of pull from there. So I uploaded work a long time ago. And years later, they contacted me. I didn't even have it updated, but it was like word of mouth. Like I was contacted by them like 3 or 4 times. And a lot of times these things don't work out. It's a learning process for me, for sure. I've been contacted so many times and it just doesn't work out because, you're dealing with all sorts of different people, architects, interior designers, engineers, and, I would say like 70% of the time it doesn't work out when they've reached out. So a company like 9 Dot, there's all sorts of companies around the country like that who work with hotels and businesses and, apartment buildings who are trying to get local art into their spaces. So that's where most of this stuff comes from. Like the art base here, this was my first solo show here. They have a call for entry every year. And so I just try and find when these calls are happening for the gallery spaces and apply for those.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I've always thought that perhaps museums and even more so galleries might shy away from installations because they're a harder sell than a framed piece of art, for example. And so I'm just curious, like how you balance that difficulty in sale for a gallery and your participation at that gallery. Do you understand what I'm trying to get to? Like,
I think I
how
do.
Okay.
Let me know if I don't answer your question, but so yeah, my work is very installation based. This, this work on the right, it's not going to sell. These wall works, I have sold in the past, but yeah, commercial galleries are not really my friend. They don't, they might want something like this, an installation kind of as a side element, but they would have a hard time selling something like this. So if you looked at my CV, a lot of where I've shown are art centers and museums, because they're not so concerned about selling the work. Of course, it's very nice if they sell it. But it's not kind of at the forefront. Like BMoCA, you know, they do have a price sheet, but you really have to ask for it, and they kind of have to dig for it. Rural Gallery, where, you know, I was showing in, it's too far back. But anyways, Rural Gallery, it was kind of one of the earlier ones. They showed my work, and I was just a little floored, because they are a commercial gallery, but they do promote contemporary work. And so I was so thankful to be in that space. But yeah, to answer your question, I really kind of seek out places where they're not super concerned about making money. And then, you know, like for this piece right here, these wall pieces, it took me so long. It's a double-sided piece. I basically made a wooden frame, almost like stretcher bars, and I tied fishing string all the way up, and these are tied. I cut
Oh my.
the felt. It was so much work. It took me, the large one probably took me 3 months to make.
Yeah.
And then these other frames the same, you know, it took me 6 months to make this piece. And this is never, I know it's not going to sell. This is for a specific spot. And for me as an artist, I have to get past that, because I want to create these spaces that people kind of navigate through, and they experience their environment in a different way. And so I basically have my works that I sell for money, like these wall works. And then I have the works that are very site specific. However, I do get contacted, you know, people were like, oh, I have this weird wall opening in this business, and I'd love to see, you know, I'd love to talk to you about that. And so usually that happens years later. Like, you know, when I first made this chandelier piece, I thought, who in the world would ever buy this? But, you know, again, I can't necessarily think about that. And then at the end of my presentation, which was in, you know, 2022, 2 years later, I, you know, put this in a permanent place at a hotel. So it's a lot of just kind of putting faith in the work and hoping that somebody wants it in their space later on. Did I answer
Thank you.
the question?
You did, and thank you. And then I have one last question. So all of the pieces you've shown us have been interiors. Have you considered ever doing an outdoor installation?
Oh, I would love to. I would probably get invited to a lot more things if I could do outdoor installations. I was once approached to do an exterior installation in downtown Denver. You know, that famous kind of square, I forget what it's called, in downtown. They string the lights in the holiday. I'm blanking on the name, but they wanted me to do something like this down there. And, you know, I put, that is something that's really hard to do, is come up with a cost for that. And this white fiber, I just don't think it would look good long term. You know, leaves would get stuck in it. It would snow on it. It would rain. And I've tried to use other materials to kind of mimic that. And in the end, I've just decided that I'm just not quite there yet. I would actually love to ask you all if you think of, if you can think of a fiber material that would be good, that, you know, would kind of share the same quality, but would have, you know, that element of being able to be outside. But yeah, that's something I'm really interested in. I just haven't gone there. I haven't gotten there yet.
My first idea would be rope and ropes
Yeah.
would be able to withstand outdoor elements, but thank you for answering those questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Couple questions in the chat. How much time passed between when you agreed to do a gallery show and when the installation needs to be complete?
It greatly varies. So I was approached by So the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art came to this show right here. This was called The Waiting Room. And I mean, my solo show was called The Waiting Room. So my show opened in March of 2021. The curator, Pamela, came to this show she asked if, we could meet. And I said, of course. You're quite excited when you get that email. And so we met here at this show and I walked her through the show. And then that led to her offering me a solo show in March of the following year. So it took a year for us to kind of plan and coordinate. And then it was COVID. So I think it got delayed a couple of times. So sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's just a few months. Like my show at Rule. Let's see, this piece right here, they saw this work and 2 months later I made this piece. And so when a gallery approaches, you're like, oh, I really want to do this. And it was early on in my installation work. And so I just had to make it happen. And, I had two small children at the time. And I remember my youngest daughter she had a blanket and she laid there on the gallery floor with me while I was putting this up. And I just had to make it work. That was the really quick time frame or turnaround, I guess I should say. And a lot of times if I have two shows at once, then I'm in trouble because I can't reuse any of my fiber and I have to, make more and more strands.
Speaking of that, Grace asked that you mentioned sometimes it takes a couple of years before you sell work. Has it
Mhm.
ever happened where someone has inquired about a work that's already been taken apart and repurposed? If yes, what did you do?
Yeah. So somebody wanted to buy this felt piece over here, this colorful one. And I just couldn't recreate it the way they wanted it to. And so then, I was showing them what I was working on. And anyways, it didn't work out for some reason. I forget exactly what, but, a lot of times, buying artwork is expensive and these materials I'm working with are quite expensive. And so I take my time into consideration about, I made this piece of work and, the time that it took me to come up with that idea, the time it took me to drive to Basalt twice to do the site visit and come back. And so, it's an expensive thing. And so, a lot of times people, they get into it and they realize, oh, wow, this is more than I was expecting, or, I have to personally come and install the work is another thing. So, there's a lot that goes into these pieces. I personally install them in people's homes, which makes it a little hard to install really anywhere. So if I'm going to have a show in New York, I personally fly there and I install the work. It adds to the cost of the work. And so it is it's a little tricky. Did I answer that question all the way? What was the question again?
Where someone has inquired about work that's been taken apart and repurposed.
Oh, okay. I think I answered that.
Yeah,
I mean, normally, like all of these are so site specific, like this piece on the back wall, it's just such a site specific piece that I have to take these down. I install them on site. I take them down on site. It's not a painting where you just hang it on the wall. The next person, if they want it in their house, I personally arrive with the bags and I install the bar and, personally go through that whole process again. It will look different and I let them know that. And, the sizes can be catered to their certain wall. So yeah.
So, as somebody with arthritis, watching you cut this felt with scissors made me wonder, do you ever use a rotary cutter?
I have one. and I'm kind of afraid of it.
Mm, yeah.
I will probably start using that more and more. I've started seeing a physical therapist for my wrist, if you can imagine. I am trying to take really good care of myself. I'm trying to be a little bit more choosy about these giant installations that I put up. Like this one right here, it's quite physical. Anyways, so I'm learning how to kind of adapt so that I don't destroy my wrists. I'd like to keep doing this, but cutting that thick felt, as you see, it's hard on my hands.
Hard.
I have to take a break. And I also like the hand cut quality of it. As you'll see here, they're not perfect lines, or maybe you can't really see, but I like the thinness of the thickness. And I like when you step up to this, you'll see my hand cut marks on it. It's not a machine cutting this. It is me. And we'll see how long I can do that for, right?
Erica, we have a member, his name is Al Canner, and he is a master macrame artist.
Oh,
Not-
okay.
Not your typical macrame. He makes these amazing 3D. He was at your talk yesterday and tying these tiny little knots. He's in his 70s and he's having to cut back on the time because it really hurts his hands. So it's good you're being careful.
Well, yeah, I'm trying. I would love to see his work. How do you spell his last name?
Canner,
Okay.
Al. And as Nicole just put, he has some installations at CU's law school.
Okay.
He used to be a professor there.
Oh,
He
really?
also had a
Oh,
piece in our showcase.
And,
Oh,
and
that's wonderful.
he has a website. His work is amazing, but on a scale so different from yours. I mean,
yeah, it sounds like his is like the opposite, like really
Yeah.
teeny.
yeah.
Which is what I used to do with my thread drawings. But his sounds even smaller than my thread drawings, but yes, I can imagine.
What do you mean by thread drawings?
So you can check them out on my website, ericagreenstudio.com, but I used to sew paper. And so basically I would take this thick watercolor paper and I would use an upholstery needle. I don't really know why. I just had one day and I just felt like it distributed the weight of my piercing a hole in the paper. And it helped my hand and my grip. And then it also helped not tear the paper too much. And so I would thread in the needle with whatever size thread and color I wanted. And then I would just basically sew this thick watercolor paper and do various designs. They were very abstract. And so that's what I was doing all prior to this installation work. Were these small thread drawings. And I think that was really a product of, I had really young children at that time and I was just trying to make some work and keep my hands busy. And so I enjoyed that small scale at that time.
Something I'm
The
interested in.
links to Erica's work is in the chat, as well as the link to Al Canner's
Oh, great.
site. Thank you, Penny and Elizabeth. Any other questions, comments? One thing I'm always curious about, Erica, do your children, my daughter has nothing to do with textile arts. She's now 34 and has 2 young children herself. Do your children do any of this?
My kids love art. And I feel like when they were younger, they did a lot more. Now they do a lot of different things. But it will be interesting to see, especially my youngest. She went she definitely spent a lot of time with me making these installations over the years. I have many pictures of her with her bottle in, inside one of my installations with her, bowl of snacks. And so I don't know, we'll see. They're definitely interested in art, but some kids are just obsessed with it. And I don't think that they're quite there yet, but they might come back to it at some point. It's fun to see what they get inspired by.
Okay, Joanne, you want to, anything else for Erica? We thank you so much. This was fascinating to get inside your head a little more tonight.
Oh yeah, thank you
And-
so much. And thanks for the tips on the various things. And I'll definitely go to the CU Law School and check out Al Canner's work. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
Yes.
it.
Erica, Al's work
Okay.
is mostly on the 4th floor and I work there. So if you ever want to swing by room 434, this invite is extended to anyone. I'm happy to show you where those are located.
Okay, thanks so much, Nicole. I'm gonna really try and make it down. And it's a permanent piece, I'm guessing.
He has several pieces. There's a rotating piece in the faculty coordinator's office, which is where I work. And then there are a couple other pieces in the hallways of the 4th floor. And then there's one large piece on the 1st floor in the clinics.
Okay. Is
See,
he?
I was talking to him the other day and he told me he has to cover everything from sun fading in his house. He mostly works with color, and even when his work doesn't have sun on it, he said it's fading, a lot of it's fading a lot. And he
I believe
doesn't
you.
quite know what to do about it.
Yeah, that's tough. That chandelier piece I made for the hotel, they wanted me to dye it indigo with indigo. And I said that I was just unsure about how it would survive. And I just didn't know how it would look. I knew it would fade and I didn't know how it would look. And so I just didn't feel good about putting that up with that in mind. So.
Interesting. Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll let you get on to your next thing. I'm going to go put my children to bed, but I really appreciate your time and in the invitation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
Again,
you,
it's very
Erica.
Fascinating.
We'll do this.
Mm. Okay. We're ready to do show and tell and talk about things that are specific for our evening group. We want to do a